What's up, everybody? I'm back. It's Thursday. Happy Thursday. Happy almost Resurrection Day. Hopefully, you've had a really great week. I am Dr. Lauren D. Pitts Bounds, and this is the March 28th edition of Dr. Pitts Tips Live. And tonight, we're going to be talking about effective communication, part two. One, two, one, two. So, for those of you that may be joining for the first time, I'd always like to provide clarity. The reason why, hey, Tweedlin, the reason why we decided to start doing this is because there is such a stigma in our communities as it relates to behavioral, relational, and mental health. And my social media manager said, you know what, Dr. Pitts, since there's so many people that won't come to therapy, why don't we bring therapy to them? And I said, you know what, that's a pretty decent idea. So we decided that we're going to do this every Thursday. We're going to bring to you topics. A lot of how I pick the topics is just based on the behavioral and relationship patterns and themes that are coming up as I work with my clients day to day. Sometimes I pull the topic from conversations that I may be having with family members or friends, or something that somebody brings to my attention that they want me to talk about. And that's the first thing that I want to say to you. Please, please, please feel free to shoot me an email or DM me, or contact me. There's a bazillion and one ways to contact me, and let me know if there's a particular topic that you would like me to speak to from a clinical perspective. And as you all know, I have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks in Life too. And what I love about my institution of higher learning, where I earned both my master's and my doctoral degrees from, is I feel like they did an outstanding job of teaching us how to marry our personal life to our formal education training and professional experience, so that as clinicians, as educators, as research scholars, we're better equipped to be able to help you to navigate this thing called life much more successfully. Um, Somebody on Instagram is saying, I could have used a de escalating communication tactic today dealing with an irate person, had to walk away. And you know what? Sometimes you do have to walk away. And then sometimes, you know what? Walking away long term might not necessarily be the solution, but definitely I'm a huge advocate of giving yourself a timeout, walking away from a person to de escalate the situation. Because as you hear me talk often on live and on my podcast, the world is full of bear pokers. Well, I have a philosophy about bear pokers, and what I say to them is this: you do know that bears will maul you to death. So you should be really, 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 really careful about going around poking bears, because bears can hurt you. And that's actually something we're going to talk about tonight, when to walk away, and how to do that effectively. So, one of the things that I want you to think about as we jump into this second part of our discussion about effective communication, and I'm going to sort of recap the tail end of what I touched on last week, is that there's always going to be opportunities in our lives, regardless of whether you're talking to an intimate partner, your children, a colleague, family member, friends, a stranger. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be opportunities for you to decide, do I allow this conversation to go south? In other words, do I allow someone's behavior to rob me of my ability to demonstrate self control and self discipline? And you've heard me say time and time and time again, there was a point in time in my life where self control and self discipline were foreign concepts to me. And it was like, once they let me out the room, once they let me off the leash, it was over and done with and off to the races. So I had to make a choice. And I have a lot of clients that ask me all the time, Dr. Pitts, you make it sound so easy. You make having self control and having self discipline sound so easy. I never said that it was easy. There's many things in life that aren't easy, but what I say to you is this: aren't you worth learning how to communicate effectively? Is it your peace of mind and the integrity, health, strength, and sustainability of your relationships, regardless of what type of relationship it is? Isn't it worth you being able to demonstrate some self control and self discipline? One of the things that I am really laser focused on at this place and space in my life. Not only do I practice what I preach with what I'm about to say, but I strongly recommend that my clients are deliberate and intentional in learning how to do this, and that is learning how to be less reactive. You Every time you find yourself in a situation or circumstance where somebody has punched your code and you're reacting, it's in those moments that you have relinquished, whether you realize it or not, you have relinquished your power, you have relinquished your control to that person that has punched your code. What's so unfortunate about that for you, if you're the person that has relinquished your power, is that because we teach people how to treat us, you've now communicated to that person that when you punch my code, I'm going to behave a certain way. And particularly when I was younger, that was my problem. People had become so accustomed to me flicking off and acting like a lunatic. They knew that if you said certain things, if you did certain things, oh, she's going to cold slap off. She's going off. She's going to black out. She's going to tear up some stuff. Somebody going to catch these hands, and it's going to be a problem. And is that really the way you want to live? Do you really want to find yourself in these situations and circumstances that, for some of you, not all, but for some of you, acting crazy might not be authentically who you are at your core, right? You have some people that actually enjoy acting crazy. Let's keep that real. You have some people that use acting crazy as a means of manipulation or control or dominance or whatever the case may be. So you got to be honest with yourself. If you're somebody who likes flicking off, if you're somebody who likes, being fiery and spicy and getting folks to, let me tell you about it, and you know what, I can tell you better than I can tell. If that's you, then this conversation isn't going to do you any good, because this conversation, these tips that I'm going to share with you are for those individuals that actually want to be effective communicators. It's those individuals that actually want to navigate life acting like a civil human being that has the ability to control yourself and act like you have some sense. It's a conversation for those individuals that are willing to put the necessary work in that is required to show up in a much more mature, civil, humane, responsible way. And I recognize and I say respectfully that, quite frankly, that's just not how everybody wants to communicate. I had a client tell me the other day that, there's a person in the individual's life that's just mean, nasty, and hateful all the time. And I said, and what that screams to me is insecurity. What that screams to me is immaturity. What that screams to me is woundedness. So as someone who's being subjected to that type of behavior, you have to decide, are you going to put boundaries in place so that you are appropriately teaching people how to treat you? I mentioned to a client actually this morning, and I said, do I strike you as someone that people try? And the client said, no, not at all. I said, do you know why that is? And the client said, why? And I said, because at this place and space in my life, I have become much more deliberate and intentional in putting firm boundaries in place and consequences for violating those boundaries. Meaning that I am no longer willing to navigate every day of my life reacting to those people who think that they can just punch my code and get me to say and do whatever they want me to say and do. Because there's people who get off on that. Yeah, that's dangerous. So for me, I believe what my grandmother told me for as long as I can remember: when people show you who they are, believe them. I'm at a place and space in my life where I believe folks. I believe what they show me. So, because the mouth will say anything, right? But does your behavior show me that you respect me? Does your behavior show that you value me? Does your behavior show that you were interested in not being a source of my pain? And if that's not the case, then what you have done is removed yourself from having intimate access to me. I didn't fire you. I didn't get brand new. I don't think that I'm so muchy much. I just made the decision that based upon your demonstrated behavior, your intimate access to me must be revoked. Why? Because you continue to show me that I'm not safe with you. I'm not safe with you. So I cannot continue to subject myself to your abuse, neglect, and maltreatment just because you think I should. And I realize that a major challenge that people have when it comes to that is they say, well, Dr. Pitts, that's easy for you to say, but it's my mom. It's easy for you to say, but it's my sibling. And so since when does hanging on the same family tree give someone that you share DNA with a license to abuse, neglect, or mistreat you? I, I tell folks maybe I'm the wrong person to discuss with that because I have firm boundaries in place with family members. I have firm boundaries in place with friends. I have firm boundaries in place with colleagues. You cannot handle me any type of way that you want to handle me. You can't. My birth certificate says Lauren Denise Pitts. Now, I will tell you that virtually nobody in my family calls me Lauren. I have a bazillion nicknames and I love all of them. But what folk in my family do not call me is out of my name in a belittling, degrading, or demeaning way. Not to my face, anyway. Why? Because I'm not tolerating that. I don't have to, nor do you. But if you think you do, then you'll continue to establish a standard that says that abuse, neglect, and maltreatment is okay. So one of the things that I want you to consider as you are being more deliberate and intentional in strengthening your communication skills is giving yourself permission to sort of pause and take a step back and determine, does this situation, problem, or event look different from the other person's perspective? In other words, this is the way that I word it. Are you willing to be mature enough, responsible enough, and effectively communicating enough to meet each person that you interact with in a place of common humanity, with an open mind and an open heart, no judgment, no criticism? You know what? Maybe, just maybe, they're having a bad day. Maybe, you know what? Maybe them coming at me, sideways. Maybe they really didn't mean it. Give yourself permission to view it from the other person's perspective. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is this person behaving this way? Because when they behave this way, I scream, yell, hoop, holler, cuss, and fuss and tell them, you're not going to be treating me that way. You're not going to be talking to me this way. But I continue to allow them to do so. Because anything that you tolerate, in essence, you are saying that it's okay. So who are you really mad at? Are you mad at yourself? Or are you mad at the person? If you're continually allowing someone to communicate with you in a manner that you deem inappropriate, the issue is in the mirror. You must look in the mirror to have a real come to Jesus conversation with you. They're treating me this way because I allow them to. And what a lot of people will say to me is, well, Dr. Pitts, why are they okay treating me that way? Because people do what you allow them to do. Everybody has personal deficiencies. People are okay taking you for granted. People are okay slamming you emotionally because you're not holding them accountable for different behavior. So you have to be willing to acknowledge the role that you play in people communicating with you in a way that you deem intolerable. The other thing that you want to take into consideration is, how is the other person's perception different from yours? Woo, woo, because it's an election year for and crazy. And people want to be able to say whatever it is they want to say. And we do have freedom of speech in this country. However, from a clinical perspective, one of the things that we discuss is intellectual boundaries. An intellectual boundary is where you have the freedom without reservation or hesitation to convey your thoughts, your feelings, your ideologies, your beliefs, your values, what have you, in a conversation in a healthy way. The operative words there is healthy way. You do have a right to think differently than I do. You have a right to hate me if you want to. But you don't have a right to hurt me. And therein lies, I believe, what one of the major issues is in this country. People want to say and do whatever it is they want to say and do, and fail to recognize that, one, you cannot unsay it, and there are certain things that come with consequences. And everybody's not calm. Everybody's not rational. Everybody's not sane. Everyone is not willing to go high when you go low. And I know there, I believe me, I know, because I work with a vulnerable population. I know that there are people that are like, well, if then they gonna do it, and they gonna do this, and they go, yeah, bro. I live in Texas. I live in Texas where everybody packing. So you can have road rage and act crazy if you want to. You can show your behind in the store because somebody cut in line in front of you if you want to. You can act a fool, because somebody took your parking spot if you want to. It might not turn out how you think. I was at 7-Eleven one day because I frequently have a taste for Slurpees. And the cashier, who is usually in the 7-Eleven that I frequent, she clearly looked like she was having a bad day. And, she recognizes me on sight, and I recognize her. And I was like, what is wrong? You look like you're having a bad day. And she said, she used an expletive talking about another customer who was standing off to the side. And she said, bloop, and she tripping. And I'm like, oh dear, that's how we talk about customers now? But this is what I'm sure of. I'm so sure, and I can't prove it. I don't know. But I believe that she came out her mouth sideways about the customer to the customer's face, talking to me, because she was packing underneath the counter. Because this is some things you just not going to say, right? Unless you crazy, you got to definitely, common sense says, maybe you shouldn't say that. But if if you got 9mm Glock courage, because that's what's under the counter, and Texas is a stand your ground state. But that's not everybody's story. So you have to take a look at how I'm communicating influencing how people communicate with me. I'm going to give you 5 key tips that I believe are key rules of effective communication. I'm going to tease them out for you. The first one is, I want you to get in the habit of making I statements, not you statements. Here's the problem with the you statements. It puts people on the defensive. It's attack. It's an attack mode statement. It's depending upon how you're coming at someone about whatever the issue is. It can be belittling, degrading, demeaning. It can sound more like blaming or scapegoating, right? You said this and you did that and you. Skirt. And I know what I'm about to say, some people see as, profanity. But when you make I statements and you actually put your finger on the pulse of how you're truly feeling, for example, When someone curses at me, notice I didn't say you. When someone curses at me, it leaves me feeling disrespected, devalued, and dismissed. Now, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I wasn't always there. I was not always there. But I will tell you, at this place and space in my life, I honestly cannot recall the last time that someone cursed at me. But what I do know is that in this capacity as a clinician, I work with many individuals that are unstable. And one of the things that we're taught is how to de-escalate. And how I de-escalate a client, even if they're not, if they're shouting at me. Now, I have had clients shout at me. I understand that X, Y, and Z may be upsetting. However, I don't do well with people shouting at me. It leaves me feeling X, Y, and Z. It's not just enough to do that. You have to convey the behavior and the mode of communication that you prefer. I'm able to hear much more effectively when I'm not being shouted at, right? I'm willing to listen reflectively and attentively when I'm not being shouted at. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the onus on myself to not react to the other person's clinical term maladaptive behaviors. And hopefully that makes sense. So making I statements, not you statements, allows you to de-escalate the situation, to connect with your emotions, and to communicate to the person in a rational and calm way that the behavior that they're demonstrating is unacceptable to you. The second thing is I want to encourage you to start practicing reflective listening. People are so busy speaking to be heard and listening to respond rather than speaking to be understood and listening to understand that they don't listen. Reflective listening is where you repeat back to me what I just said to you, not in a smug, ignorant, obnoxious, sarcastic way, but genuinely and sincerely communicating back to me your interpretation of what I said. When you demonstrate reflective listening, you are now creating space for the other person to either say, yes, that's exactly what I meant, or to further clarify. But when you're just listening to respond, you're not hearing. And you're on the defensive because you're coming back in attack mode. You're defending yourself, you're defending your idea, you're defending your thought. Whereas reflective listening creates opportunity for much more effective and authentic conversation. The third thing that I want you to think about is, and this, this one's huge, and I hear it all day, every day. You have to understand and accept the differences that exist between how men and women communicate. Contrary to what people think, women are not the only ones that communicate in a manner that's driven by emotion. Let me just be the first to tell you, if nobody has said this before, the anger and or the rage or the irritation and frustration that men are often accused of communicating in that fashion, those are emotions. Ooh, yes, those are emotions. So men communicate using emotional language too. Are our brains wired different? They absolutely positively are. Physiologically, anatomically, we are wired different. Men tend to be problem solvers. Women tend to be more relational and emotional driven. And when I say emotionally driven, I don't mean like, I can't. No, I'm talking about the full gamut of emotions that are behind how you relate to and connect with other people, because we are relational by nature, whereas oftentimes men, particularly in our society are taught that emotions are a sign of weakness. But as I've said before, and I will maintain, I'm sure, until the day I die, our prisons are full of people who never learned how to regulate their emotions. So, I'm thinking if people could learn how to regulate their emotions, we would be able to lower the recidivism rate. But that's just my personal professional take on that. But there's definite differences, and we need to be clear on the differences that exist and how we process information as it relates to our gender differences, right? Because it absolutely positively plays a role in, and it's a vital part of how we communicate. So keep that in mind, and don't, no, I want to reframe that. Resist the temptation to be sarcastic and obnoxious about the gender differences. Like, none of us can help what we were born. We were born what we were born, right? So communication is learned, but physiologically, anatomically, how we're wired does play a part in that. So it would be beneficial to you to take that into consideration, as it relates to whether or not you actually are communicating effectively with someone of the opposite sex. The other key point that I want to bring to your attention is apologizing when necessary. And can I just tell you, I said I was sorry. That doesn't count. Mm-mm. That doesn't count. Or transparency. What I used to say was, why on earth would I apologize? I really don't mean it. Oh, that was my thing back in the day. I was quick because I'm like, I'm because I've always, and I do mean always. I've always been very deliberate and intentional in what I say and how I say it. And there have been times where I look back in retrospect and I certainly acknowledge and take full responsibility that just because I felt it, I didn't have to say it the way that I did. So I had to own that, and I had to be willing to modify my delivery and demonstrate more temperance, because if the objective is that you want the message to be received, and I said it last week, if you want the message to be received, then you have to know your audience, and you have to be willing to speak in a manner that people actually want to listen, right? So I recognize that a work on for me, particularly many, many years ago, is my inner mama comes out. My mom's name is Paulette. You've heard me say that before. My inner Paulette comes out, and I say it the way I feel it, and then I done left you sliced and diced emotionally, and it genuinely and sincerely wasn't my intention to wound you with my mouth, but I did, and I had to take responsibility and accountability for that. In contrast, though, when I was the walking wounded, oh, my intention was to go for the jugular. I was going to slit your throat with this mouth, because hurting people hurt people. I'm certainly not, justifying my behavior or whatever the case may be, but I did it because that was how I got you up off of me. I was hurting, and I wanted other people to feel the pain that I was feeling. So that was my very, very, very unhealthy communication style. So I wasn't always quick to apologize, and if I did, it wasn't always in the most appropriate way. So one of the things that you have to take into consideration is the whole objective of apology, and what makes apology true and sincere is behavior modification. If you keep telling me you're sorry and you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, I'm going to believe what you're showing me. And what you're showing me is that you really don't care that you're hurting me. So there has to be a willingness on the part of the person that's injuring with their mouth to take responsibility and accountability for how they're communicating, and for that behavior that could perhaps be making people in your life, personally or professionally, less inclined to want to communicate with you. They're less inclined to want to communicate with you because you're not open and receptive to hearing their point of view. They're less inclined to want to communicate with you because it's all about you. You're not taking their feelings into consideration. They don't want to communicate with you because you're never willing to swallow your pride. You have to be right all the time, and you're not open and receptive to entertaining, even if you don't disagree. You're not even receptive to entertaining another perspective or point of view. So, what you have to do is you have to ask yourself, as you evaluate your relationships and you think about this conversation that we're having tonight, ask yourself, the people that you find yourself the most argumentative and combative with, when and how do you apologize? Does one of you apologize more than the other? Do you use apologies to sort of skirt over or dismiss the real issues at hand? Because if that's how you're using apologies, it's not going to work. Again, a true, sincere, authentic apology requires behavior modification. And that behavior modification for the better is what's going to make that apology much more effective. The other thing that I want to put on your radar as we're wrapping up is communicating through touch. And when I talk about communicating through touch, I'm not talking about reaching out and slapping somebody because they frustrated you or made you mad. I'm talking about recognizing that gentle, tender, calming, soothing touch has the ability to increase the integrity, health, strength, and sustainability of your relationships. We know that research has shown that part of our human makeup requires that we experience physical and emotional closeness with other human beings. In other words, you could die or feel like you're dying from lack of touch. And there's scientific evidence that proves that the receptors that are in our skin, when we're touched, it sends messages to the brain. And the brain releases those chemicals that create that calm, that create that soothe, that creates that ability to de-escalate situations and circumstances because of the calming touch. If somebody, unless there's some crazy extenuating circumstance where you have to respond aggressively to get someone to calm down, oftentimes the best way to de-escalate a situation is a calm and gentle touch, a taking of the hand, a touch on the shoulder or the arm. You need to understand how you learned to touch. There's a clinical term that we use called high contact or low contact. And part of what can be instrumental in helping you to better understand why you respond to touch or why you communicate or don't communicate with touch the way that you do, it's going to be connected to how you grew up. Did you grow up in a high contact, healthy touch home, or low contact, unhealthy, or no touch home? In order for you to have healthy relationships, there has to be that healthy connection. In other words, you have to decide if you're willing to be more touch oriented. Now, I will tell you, as someone that, because of my trauma history, has developed challenges around touch, what I've learned to do is communicate to family members and friends that I have sensory challenges around touch. So dependent upon what's going on with me emotionally, or dependent upon what type of headspace I'm in, there are times in my life where I'm less receptive to touch, and I will, but I'm aware of it because I do the self work and I stay in touch with my feelings and what my body is telling me about, you know, what's going on with me psychologically. And it's in those times that I will communicate to family and friends, please don't just hug me or touch me. Ask me if it's okay, because there's times that I'm totally receptive to it and it is comforting. And then there's times, depending on what headspace I'm in, where it really feels like broken glass being scraped upon across my skin, and it feels more like a violation than something that was intended to comfort. So you have to know yourself. You have to be self-aware, and how you increase your self-awareness is you have to be willing to evaluate the root of why you are the way you are in various areas of your life. Because how can you ever heal? How can you ever get out of your own way? How can you ever come forth and evolve as a stronger, healthier, better version of yourself that has healthier, sustainable relationships if you fully don't understand the root of why you think, feel, function, and navigate life the way that you do? So in closing tonight, I'm just going to throw a couple of things out there that I want you to reflect upon that hopefully will be instrumental in helping you to improve how you communicate. I want you to take a look at what are your personal strengths and challenges when it comes to effective communication. You'll hear me say time and time and time and time again, one of the terms that we say, and one of the things that we say clinically is the first step to recovery is admitting that you have a problem. Well, how can you ever learn to communicate effectively if you're not willing to acknowledge that effective communication is a problem for you? You can't fix it if you won't acknowledge that it's broken, right? So I want you to really give yourself permission to sort of fall back and evaluate what are your strengths and what are your challenges when it comes to effective communication, and resist the temptation to make the breakdown in communication in your life all about what everybody else is saying and doing. Don't make everybody else the problem. Be courageous enough to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself about where your growth opportunities lie as it relates to your communication style. I want you to think about why it's important, and this one's huge. Why do you think it's so important to focus first on who you are as a person before practicing communication techniques? So here's what I mean by that. You've heard me say before that, and I've referenced my husband in this example. There are positive experiences that my husband has with me because I'm committed to being the strongest, healthiest, best version of myself that I can be. And I know this might sound strange. I don't communicate effectively with him because of him. I communicate effectively with him because I want to be an effective communicator, and he reaps the benefits of that. So that's what I mean when I say you have to know who you are. You have to get clarity on, I mean, really, not some superficial stuff. You need to get clarity on why you think, feel, function, and navigate life the way that you do at the root, at the core of who you are. And once you get truly, truly clear on why you think, feel, function, and navigate life the way that you do holistically, it'll be easier for you to practice effective communication skills because you'll have a much greater understanding of why you do what you do the way that you do. And then you get to decide, am I okay communicating in a way that's not producing the results that I want? It's going to be an opportunity for growth for you. And then me say this. I think there are far too many people who are navigating life, and I say this respectfully. I believe that there are too many people who are navigating life from a very limited perspective because of limited mindsets that keep them stuck in their uncomfortable comfort zone. Healing takes work. Maturing takes work. Evolving into a stronger, healthier, better version of yourself takes work. I don't even know, this is social media, so some people I can see, some people I can't. But this is what I truly believe. I believe that each and every person that listens to this session in part or in its entirety is worthy and so deserving of being the absolute strongest, healthiest, best version of themselves that they can be. But that's going to take self-work. It is going to take one's willingness to acknowledge that I need to grow. Because the reality of it is, if you look around, your life is a reflection of your state of mind. The condition of your relationships are a reflection of your state of mind. The condition of your finances are a reflection of your state of mind. Your physical health is a reflection of your state of mind. The Bible says, "Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that works in us." And I truly believe that the reason why so many people are navigating life wounded and insecure with substandard relationships and substandard quality of life is because they're not willing to change their state of mind. They're not willing to access the power that lies within them so that they can improve. I thank you for tuning in tonight. As always, I gotta go because I have a session to do. But I want you to have an amazing, amazing, amazing holiday weekend for those of you who celebrate Resurrection Sunday. He is risen, and I'm so thankful for it. You all have a blessed and wonderful weekend and week to come, and I'll see you right back here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.